was going to be me sitting there. And Padmavajra very generously offered to come and do it for me, actually, which was quite astonishing. Yes, I've just been on retreat with Padmavajra up at Padmaloka, a retreat centre that mainly is involved with helping men train for aviation, where Padmavajra lives. And we were on a retreat. I was there mainly actually just to support Arta Priya, my dear friend and preceptor, who's recently got cancer in May. We weren't sure whether he'd be able to get there or not. By the end of the retreat, I must admit, I was looking a little bit exhausted, a little bit ill, and Padmavajra just sort of saw me and he said, "I hope you're going to be able to get a rest." I said, "Well, actually, I've got a talk. I've got a talk to give." And Padmavajra said, "Well, I could give it." Well, I could give it. Which I was just really, I didn't know quite what to say, actually. It was such a generous offer. So he lives over in Norwich, and just to drive over, because I was a bit sick, I'm a lot better now. The symptoms are, I've had a COVID test, don't worry. But it was just, it's so typical of Padmavajra, actually. I couldn't quite settle on how to introduce Padmavajra, actually, but the metaphors that I kept coming up with were water metaphors. Padmavajra is like an oasis in the desert. He really is like an oasis. He certainly was for me at that moment, thinking, "Gosh, I've got this talk to write. I'm exhausted." Kind of, and then it seemed like a desert. And Padmavajra kind of came over the sand dune, stretching the metaphor a bit. But Padmavajra's. He's like that in so many ways, actually. He really is. He's an oasis of inspiration, this inspiration that just sort of wells up. You don't know where it sort of comes from. He seems to be so frequently sort of inspired and so able to sort of give voice to that he really is, like many of our wonderful order members, very experienced order members, they are oases actually in the what can be a rather arid sort of landscape that we live in. Just being able to go to Padmaloka, go over to Padmaloka to hear Padmavajra speaking again, and to have him come here. Well, look what it's done to the Dharma light. The Dharma light is suddenly sort of flourishing with more than we can kind of fit in. And yeah, we do. Our order members, our senior experienced order members, are like that. They really are like that. So Padmavajra is very much one of those. His hospitality, his friendship, his inspiration, his love of the Dharma is like an oasis in the desert. So thank you very, very much, Padmavajra, for coming and giving us this talk. So Padmavajra is going to continue in the theme that we're exploring, which is this parable from the White Lotus Sutra, the parable of the burning house. Last week, we heard about the burning house, and this week, we're going to take a step on from that. Padmavajra may refer back, but we're going to start to explore some of the other metaphors and symbols within that parable. Next week, embarrassment of riches, we've got Jan Barcher coming on to yeah, so without further ado, and thank you.
Thank you, Arta Siddhi, for a very lovely introduction, and I'm very glad to be here in Cambridge again. Been quite a while since I was last here, and this room's changed since I was last here. Arta Siddhi was explaining why it's changed. But actually, I think a while back you were asking me to come and do stuff, weren't you? I think in another context. So I'm glad I was in that sort of spontaneous mood. I mean, a lot of my life is sort of programmed, unfortunately. I have my next year is already quite planned for me, and it's not actually the way I like to live. It's this, kind of modern Triratna that we're in. Modern Buddhists seem to like to, put you in a box forever. But when I was younger, and especially when I lived in India, you know, sometimes you'd be asked to do a talk, you know, the next day, and you just go and do it. And in a way, that's how I'd prefer to live. To be honest, I'd much prefer to do that. So when I saw poor Artesidia Sunday, you know, really looking under the weather, I wanted to respond. And it's a wonderful theme that you've got going on from the Lotus Sutra, the parables. I actually want to start somewhere else. I want to start at an earlier period of Buddhism. The Buddha, in fact, a very famous teaching of the Buddha, which it's very striking language, which begins, all is burning. What is the all that is burning? The I is burning, forms are burning, I consciousness is burning, contact is burning. Burning with what? Burning with the fire of craving, with the fire of hate, with the fire of delusion. I say it is burning with birth, aging and death, with sorrows, with lamentations, with pains, with griefs, with despairs. The ear is burning, sounds are burning, the nose is burning, smells are burning, the tongue is burning, tastes are burning, the body is burning, touch is burning, the mind is burning, thoughts are burning. Burning with what? Burning with the fire of lust, with the fire of hate, with the fire of delusion. I say it is burning with birth, aging and death, with sorrows, with lamentations, with pains, with griefs, with despairs. Wow. Strong stuff, I think. You might, English literary people might recognise the where T.S. Eliot got his burning, all is burning from, which is quoted in The Wasteland, of course. In a way, very appositely, I think. But this is a teaching that the Buddha gave to some fire worshippers that he kind of converted to the Dharma and converted to the Buddhist path. And what is very striking about this teaching is the Buddha is making it clear that the burning house, which is, you know, the theme of your study, is us. It's us. We're the burning house. It's interesting, you know, the house, you know, you often have dreams, don't you, of being in a house, sometimes a huge house. I have a recurring dream, just it's obviously something to do with my psychology, where I'm trying to get out of a very, very complicated house, and which seems to be getting bigger and bigger as I try to escape. And this house is on fire with greed, hatred, and delusion, and with all the different kinds of suffering. Sounds very drastic, doesn't it? The Buddha's teaching. But the Buddha is making it very, very clear what the human predicament is, what the human situation is. We tend to think, us moderns, that we are sort of uniquely challenged because of, you know, all the terrible things that are going on in the world, you know, and because of, you know, 24-hour news cycles, because of technology, we seem to be aware of every awful thing that happens everywhere. But in a sense, that's a massive distraction. In a sense, that's a massive distraction. Long before that, over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha was saying, your situation is really difficult. You are on fire. It's not because of climate change. It's not because of war. It's because of craving, hatred, delusion. It's because of what your mind does, what your heart does, what your intention does. There is another side of the story, which we'll come to do with our potentiality, which Kudapriya beautifully evoked, I thought, in his superb meditation instruction. But we do need to really look at ourselves. We need to look at our situation. We need to look at our suffering, yes, but we need to see what the roots of that are. Of course, our suffering can often be to do with external factors. our, maybe our upbringing, the kind of circumstances that we've been in, what's happened to us in our life. But whatever has happened, the Buddha is very, very clear. The only way out, the only possible way out, is if you really get to grips with yourself. You really get to grips with your situation, your human situation. It's the only possible way to change things. Of course, when you can, you change your environment. If living in a different environment, living around better people, more supportive people, and so on and so forth, that does change things. Having more money, having more wealth, having a better job, all that kind of thing does change things. We know that. But whatever happens, however good your situation, you've still got to get to grips with this. This is the essence of the Dharma. The essence of Buddhist practice is to take full responsibility for oneself. However, we do need help, because that's a very tough teaching. I find it a tough teaching. In some ways, I find Buddhism quite irritating. I must admit, when you read a teaching about hatred never ceases through hatred. Hatred never ceases through hatred here in this world. It only ceases through love. This is the eternal law. Well, that is quite an irritating teaching. It's absolutely true. But, under pressure in certain circumstances, it's a bit hard to feel that if you're being very provoked by somebody, or you feel you're being provoked by somebody. But Buddhism is very clear. The Buddha is very, very clear. There is absolutely no justification for indulgence in craving and hatred and delusion. You've got to get a hold of yourself. And that is a tough teaching. So, as well as very challenging teachings like this, you also have teachings which employ what is called traditionally as upaya koshoya, skillful means, whereby the Buddha or great teachers devise, in a way quite spontaneously, quite naturally, through their communication, ways to sort of, in a way, to introduce people gradually to that truth, to that realization. We need to be, we sort of need to be seduced in a way into Buddhist practice. We need to be attracted by the Dharma. These tough teachings are a bit hard to hear at first. So we need something that really attracts us, really draws us. I have to say, Kulapriya, that's one of the best introductions to the mindfulness of breathing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, he was asking me whether I wanted to lead the meditation. I'm saying I don't lead meditations anymore, and thank goodness I didn't, because I was completely fascinated by your introduction. We need that kind of teaching where you're sort of lulled and lured into the Dharma, into greater awareness, so that you can start looking at these, more difficult, more demanding, in a way, more challenging teachings. And the Lotus Sutra that you're looking at is all about skillful means. It's all about that. The sutra is one of these great Mahayana epic sutras, extremely important, particularly in Eastern Asia. It was known in India, but it seems to have really taken off in China and Japan and Korea. But it is an amazing sutra. Our teacher Sangharakshita says you need to read this sutra as if you're looking at a sort of mystery play. It has that kind of feeling to it. It starts on the Gridhakuta, the Vulture's Peak, this great rock outcrop in Bihar, in northern India, not that far from Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha spent so much time. And on the top of this, which is, as our teacher says in his incredible lecture series on the Lotus Sutra, this is really stands for the summit of existence. It's not that there is a geographical basis for this place, but it's not a vulture's peak. It's not the vulture's peak in the sense of history. It's more like an archetypal mountain which surveys the world all around. And the Buddha is there in deep samadhi, deep meditation. And he's in meditation for a very, very long time. He's surrounded by his great disciples, what are known as bodhisattvas and arahants and gods and goddesses and all sorts of people, ordinary people like ourselves, a great mass of people congregating round because they know something sensational is going to happen. And it does, because a great white light comes from the Buddha's forehead, and the light is so powerful, it illuminates all the directions of space. And in all the directions of space, in a multitude of what are called Buddha fields, there are Buddhas teaching, there are bodhisattvas liberating beings, there are people going along the path to enlightenment. It's a sensational vision on display to everybody. Clearly, we're not in the realm of historical fact. We're in a visionary realm when we read this sutra. You have to read it as sort of transcendental science fiction when you read this kind of text and be transported by it. And somebody, one of the great bodhisattvas, I think it's Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom, says, I think he's going to reveal the Dharma Pundarika. This is the moment, the time. When Buddhas do this, you've obviously seen this happen before, this is a kind of recurring thing in existence in the cosmos. I think he's going to reveal the Dharma Pundarika Sutra. The white lotus of the real truth. The white lotus of the real truth. He's going to tell it. This this incredible revelation. The Buddha emerges from meditation, and he starts to say, I'm going to all the things that I've taught you. There is so much more. I've taught you how to reach nirvana, but there is more. There is more to come. At which point 500 people leave. Because more? We've done it. We've made it. We've arrived. How can there be more? Which, of course, in itself is very significant. It's so easy to think that we've arrived. We do a bit of Buddhist practice. We might have been, like myself, a member of our order for a very, very long time. And it's very tempting to think you've sort of done it. Fortunately, we've got enough spiritual friends around to remind us that no, you haven't. There's a long, long way to go. There is actually no end to this endeavor. Anyway, those people leave, and he starts to teach what's called the Ekayana, the one way, the Buddhayana, the way to supreme and perfect enlightenment. We get a bit technical when we start to get into this. He said he talks about the Shravaka Yana path, the Pratyeka Yana Buddha path, the Pratyeka Buddha Yana path, and the Bodhisattva Yana. These are different sort of approaches or different ways to different destinies according to Buddhist history. In a sense, the Lotus Sutra is challenging a kind of settled view of Buddhist training, that you can get on a path that leads to an enlightenment for yourself. You can get on a path where you discover enlightenment for yourself, but you don't teach it, or you can get onto a path where you're trying to gain enlightenment for all beings. The Buddha is saying those don't exist. Yana means something like vehicle, can be translated as way. But those vehicles don't exist in reality. They're illusory. If I've taught them as a skillful means. And, you can see the attraction of that. If you come along to the Dharma and let's say you're suffering, you've got a lot of difficulties, you want relief. You want a bit of meditation. You want to meet some spiritual friends. You want to do perhaps a bit of Dharma study, but your main aim is just relief. Relief from that pain, relief from that sorrow, just a bit of freedom. It's a totally fine, a totally realistic way of approaching things. You might come along and you feel that you really want to do something for the world, for life. You know, you're very concerned, so many people are, about the fate of the world. But, you know, your efforts have made you feel, well, maybe you've had a bit of burnout or something like that. So you think a bit of meditation, a bit of Buddhism will patch you up, put you back together so you can go out there again, you know, and do all that for other people. These are all fine. They're all approaches. They're all legitimate approaches. But what the Buddha is actually saying, in the end, any kind of growth, any kind of development must actually lead to becoming a fully enlightened Buddha. Someone who, at some point where Buddhism has been completely lost, where the path to liberation is not found, will find it by their own efforts and then teach it widely to others. This is what the Buddha is saying. I mean, I know it sounds a bit strange in the way we're dealing with sort of technical aspects of Buddhist history, but it's actually incredibly exciting. The way you can sort of boil it down, I think, is that there is no such thing as an enlightenment just for yourself. No such thing as a liberation just for yourself. And if you really want to help others, you have to work on yourself. In other words, if you have to work on yourself and you have to benefit others. Otherwise, there is no full development, no full progress in a spiritual life, in a Buddhist life. I was thinking about this in relation to the three lakshanas that you might be familiar with. This is a very fundamental Buddhist teaching, and I think they're having a talk on that next door. So if you're missing out on next door, you're going to get on the lakshanas. So the lakshana means mark, the mark of conditioned life, the mark of the samsara, the mark of unenlightened life, if you like. The first mark is that everything is impermanent. Nothing resists impermanence. Everything arises and passes away, arises and passes away. That process is going on all the time. Nothing resists that. Nobody resists that. The next mark is that everything is marked by unsatisfactoriness. You know, even if you're very, very happy, even if things are going really well, there'll be some grain, some aspect of you that is dissatisfied, that longs for something more, maybe even something not of this world. And of course, we also know how much suffering that there is in this world. And then there's the mark of what they call anatman, the mark of no fixed and permanent self. That if you examine yourself, if you examine other people, you won't find any essence. Everything, in a sense, is sort of open, unrestricted, unlimited. These three lakshanas, the insight into these is not just seeing them, as it were, in yourself. You see these things in the whole of life. And when you see these, what then inevitably opens is love and compassion. So you might be dwelling on the impermanence of things. And we know, I'm very aware of this at the moment because I've just had a family bereavement. My beloved sister died a few weeks ago. She'd been ill for some time. And it was a very, very poignant, very moving funeral, a lot of sadness, a lot of love. You know, I was obviously very affected, still very affected by that. And seeing, I have one sister left now in my family because mum and dad went a long time ago. So I'm seeing my family disappearing. Of course, that isn't personal. That's not personal to me. I know many, many people who've had bereavements lately. You can't sort of separate yourself off in terms of impermanence. Everybody suffers from impermanence. Everybody loses loved ones. So if you see the impermanence of things, it actually brings you closer to others. That's what it should be doing, not to cut you off, but to actually come into a much deeper connection. It's a very famous verse in the Dhammapada, very early on in the Dhammapada, one of the great texts of Buddhist tradition. Others do not realize that we're all heading for death. Those who do realize it will end their quarrels. When I first heard that verse, when I really heard it, I thought the Buddha was definitely enlightened. Definitely enlightened. There's such a truth, such an elegance, such a directness in that teaching. When you realize that you will die, you will end your quarrels with others. You know that quarrels are useless. You know that if you're quarreling and in conflict and you die or they die, there is no possibility of resolution. There's no possibility of connection and love. So the realization of impermanence must embrace, must bring about the embrace of others with love and kindness and consideration. Obviously, realizing the truth of unsatisfactoriness, of suffering, that's, again, obviously not personal to you. It's said, when you realize the truth of universal suffering, you enter a particular liberation, a particular meditative liberation called the unbiased. The unbiased, you know, and the unbiased is associated with great compassion. You will not have a bias towards yourself or any one other person, because suffering is all pervasive. You will develop compassion for everybody. And the truth of not self, well, when you realize not self, what really happens, I mean, you hear people talking about their realization of not self sometimes, and they're going on and on about it, and you think, I think you're missing the point here. You're not self, sounds very not selfless. Because if you realize that you have no separate essence, you become unselfish. You realize you are not the center of the universe. There are all these centers of the universe, all these points, all these glowing points, all these sort of lights, if you like, that you connect with, and you start to enter into what they call anukampa, which is to shake with, to vibrate with, to resonate with. And you can connect with people really deeply and, really be of help to them. So these, very basic so-called teachings of Buddhism, you can see when you realize these lakshanas, you enter into a much more compassionate awareness and activity in relation to others. There is no such thing as a purely personal attainment. No such thing. You need to work not just on yourself, but you need to work on affecting other people very, very positively, as well as letting them into you. So in the Lotus Sutra, after the Buddha has given this great revelation, everybody's kind of confused, and the Buddha says, well, let me tell you a parable, let me tell you a story that will make the teaching clear. That will make what I've done very, very clear, because some of the great disciples are really puzzled. They faithfully followed the Buddha's teaching, and they've really attained something. And then he says, there's more, there's more. And so they want to know, well, can you explain what's gone on here? So he said, it's like an elder, a very old man who owns a huge mansion. And this old man has got hundreds of children and grandchildren. Doesn't say anything about a wife for some reason. Probably doesn't fit the parable, but anyway, let's not take these things too literally. But anyway, there's an elder. He owns this mansion. He's got hundreds of children, maybe grandchildren and all the rest of it. And it's a really crumbling mansion full of ghosts. I can't help but bring to mind a sort of almost cosmic version of, the house in Great Expectations. Do you remember where Pip goes in? It's in Kent, isn't it? What's the name of the old lady who's? There we are, Miss Havisham. I'm only familiar with the David Lean version of the film, not more of the book, not the more recent one. But the mansion is like that. It's full of ghosts, full of which you can say, if you like, if you want to translate that, it is a parable. It's all our past conditioning that haunts us, all those things that keep spooking us, tripping us up in our life. And the children are completely absorbed in their games. They're just running around, chasing each other. I just imagine, fabulous games of hide and seek. And they're absolutely absorbed in their games. We're absorbed in our games, aren't we? Even our Buddhism can be a bit of a game, can't it? It can be a way of deluding ourselves, kidding ourselves that we're sorted. But it's a kind of game, and we're running from really looking at ourselves and so on and so forth. It's the way we could see it. There's loads of things you can do with this house and with the children in it. And then the mansion catches fire. And the elder, because he's outside, he can see it's on fire. The children don't know that it's on fire. And he calls to them, come on, out of the fire. The house is burning. All is burning. But that all is burning teaching, nobody's going to want to listen to that, are they? Being told, look, you're on fire with greed, hatred, and delusion. I want my games, I want my fun, I want to look at my ghosts, do lots of therapy, and so on and so forth. Just keep looking at the ghosts endlessly. I like being spooked. It's all about me. So they're not interested in that. So the elder, he plays a trick. He said, look, children, calling out to them, I've got out here some great toys for you. I've got deer carts, carts pulled by deer. I've got dog carts pulled by dogs. I've got bullock carts. I can't remember all the different carts, but there are various carts. Maybe it doesn't sound very appealing to us. I'm sure there's a modern version of the parable of the burning house where there's particular kind of iPhones and all that Netflix subscriptions. Let's not go down that road. Let's stay in old India. When they hear that, they're really excited. Oh, great! Our elders got these fantastic new toys, and they're sort of visualizing themselves, galloping away in their lovely deer carts and dog carts and all the rest of it. When they come out, actually, there aren't any of these things. There are just magnificent bullock carts, sleek white bullocks, pulling these great carts with wonderful cushions in them, almost like thrones. And of course, the children are a bit puzzled by this. Well, there's only these fantastic bullock carts, and then he explains, well, I'm giving you so much more than what I said. I just had to get you out. And off they go in the bullock carts. I just want to say something about bullock carts. It's because it's not something we see in Cambridge or even in Norwich. I mean, we got even in Norfolk, even in the countryside. Although we have got a magnificent bull at the moment in the field up the road. I mean, he's a real cracker, wonderful, very uncommunicative, unfortunately. Never mind. But I've actually ridden in a bullock cart when I lived in India. I mean, bullock carts are actually very, very important. I mean, they are actually a means of transport, particularly in the villages, going from village to village, to carry sugarcane and, or, vegetables of various kinds. But sometimes they're used in a procession. And one time when I was in India, I was taken to a village I was on a village tour in a village in an area called Nasik, really far away from anywhere, with Buddhist people, and they wanted to show me off in the village. In those days, I was an Angarika, I was a sort of Buddhist monk, I was wearing yellow robes, I was a very honoured guest to the village, so they put me in a bullock cart. So it was a wooden cart with two magnificent white bullocks in front. There's a driver. There were kind of cushions they put in it, which is not how they usually are when you're traveling. Banana leaves over my head, like a sort of canopy. It was very, very hot, middle of the day. And they were processing me round the village to show me off before I was to give my Dharma talk. Not only did they do that, the men did this particular country dance, which is done particularly by Buddhist people, called leji, with these percussion instruments, a kind of almost quite ritualized dance ahead of me. So we're going along with the men dancing. Not only that, the children were letting off these incredibly loud bangers. And of course, the poor bullocks, every time the bangers went off, they jolted, and I was sort of lifted up from my seat. Not only that, there was no road. I mean, it was just over sort of stones, and no wonder I got a really bad back, from that. But it was actually quite a magnificent thing, the bullock cart. It really was. And what the Buddha is giving, with what in the parable is an even more magnificent bullock cart with, I think, even more than two great bulls pulling it. And of course, this is to symbolize the one vehicle, the one way to enlightenment, the way that includes both self and other. The Buddha goes even further in illustrating this. He says some really remarkable things in the sutra. He talks about how any movement in the direction of going beyond yourself, that potential that Kulapriya was talking about in the meditation, any movement, even the smallest gesture, will flower into full Buddhahood, full enlightenment, the full vision of things as they are, and great compassion. He says, whoever just offers a flower to an image of the Buddha, or to a stupa, or to a holy person, that offering will one day flower into their enlightenment. It's an incredibly optimistic vision of life. I think this is really important. You've had all is burning stuff. Now we need the other side. Though any movement where you step out of a restricted sense of self to other, whether it's to looking up to that which inspires you, moves you to develop you, or a gesture to another person, that is a step towards enlightenment that will flower. So it's really, really important to remember. Sometimes Buddhist practice can feel very difficult. It can feel hard, can't it? If you've taken up meditation, and you're really, and maybe your life's hard, complicated, work's difficult, home life is difficult. You don't want to do 20 minutes of meditation. You don't even want to do 10 minutes of meditation. You can do 5 minutes. You can do 2 minutes. That might be not very, it'd be too much. Well, if you have a shrine or something like that at home, well, go and get a flower and offer it, or give to somebody. Do something where you step out of yourself. It counts. It adds up. A momentum develops. I feel this very, very strongly. You know, in my own, you know, I mean, even after all these years of spiritual practice, you know, I have real off days. It happens, you know, there's no use pretending. I do, you know, but I can always do something. I mean, one of the things I like about the summer, living where I live, which has a fabulous garden, I can gather rose petals or loose flowers and I can offer them to my shrine. And in some ways, that's the most important part of the day. Before I even sit down to meditate, in a way, orientating myself towards, you know, what is most important, what is deepest in my life is the most important thing. Setting my course. When I've set my course, in a sense, whatever the quality of the meditation is kind of secondary. I'm facing the right direction. Sometimes it can be that I've been all over the place in meditation. I've fallen asleep. I've been distracted. You know, I've, you know, had a massive argument with somebody in my mind. You know, and you come to the end and think, crikey, you know. What I do at the end, when that sort of thing happens, at the end, when I bow, I make a resolution. I may have been defeated this time, but I'm not going to be defeated next time. And if I am defeated next time, I'm going to recommit myself to this life because I want to live this life. I want to develop myself in the direction of enlightenment. It's so important to set your resolve. In Tibetan Buddhism, actually based on Indian Buddhism, all Buddhism really, there's a lot of emphasis on resolution and intention and forming resolutions in your mind, being really clear about what you really want to do and to keep resetting that resolution because it's hard to change sometimes. You know, we can be so distracted by our stuff. We need to be remind ourselves of our direction, and that will bear fruit. It does bear fruit. You have to lean in that direction, lean into that direction of liberation. But we do need help. We need to listen. The elder calls. And Arthur particularly wanted me to talk about this call, being called. You know, what calls you? It's good to look at your life. What called you here? What brought you here? What was what were the things that brought you to this place, that brought you here tonight, that brought you here to learn meditation, to learn Buddhist practice? Was it, you know, something in yourself? I mean, there's a lovely, very, very homely little sutra which talks about something in us, which is like the cry of a sparrow breaking out of the egg, a tiny cheep, cheep. I don't know if that's what baby sparrows are like. I can hear the jackdaws in their nest in the chimney above my room at the moment, calling out to mum and dad for their food all the time. It's wonderful. They come every year, the jackdaws. But you know, sometimes it can be like that. There's a call inside you, something trying to break out, something trying to break out, something different, not defined by your stuff, not defined by your circumstances. What was that call? It's always good to remember that. It's always good to remember that beginner's mind, that early mind, that almost innocent and pure response to things. So there's something that wants to break out. In this sutra, which talks about the sparrow, they say this is actually the bodhicitta, the urge of wisdom and compassion, you know, breaking through, breaking out in you. You might not know it as that when you first come along, but that's what it is, the urge to self-transcendence. But there's also a call from outside. It's always good to remember, well, what were the influences that set you on this path? I was thinking when I was meditating about, and it would be many different things that called you, but I was particularly remembering, it was a call, when I was about, was it 15, 16, my parents moved to Sussex when I was 2. So I was brought up in a semi-detached on a housing estate near Brighton, very ordinary working class family. I was a very, very curious child and teenager, always sort of seeking the obscure. I was always interested in the obscure. If other people were into stuff, that was a good reason not to be into it. You know, I'm one of these, a bit snobbish perhaps, but if all of my mates at school were into David Bowie or whatever it was, I would not be. So I was always seeking something different, and so sometime in about 15 or 16, so this is early 1970s, I discovered music, and I can remember very, very vividly the first time I put on, I don't know how I found my way to this particular musician, but it was the music of the great American saxophonist John Coltrane. And I can remember hearing that music, and it was a call. It was this tender, visceral cry going straight to the heart, bypassing everything, was straight to the nervous system, and sending me into ecstasy, sending me into a state beyond the given, if you like. And it then became kind of religious practice for me to listen to that music. And that started the journey to discover Buddhism. And there were many calls, many other calls sort of coming to me. The first time I went along to a Buddhist center, the thing that really got a hold of me was performing a 7-fold puja and chanting mantras. Mantra can have a meaning of a call. The mantra of a bodhisattva, the sound symbol of a mantra like Om Mani Padme Hum is a cry. It's calling out to you. It called to me. But by the time I'd come to the end of that puja, I knew I was going to devote my life to Buddhism, to the Dharma. I had a vocation, if you like, and vocation, of course, means you're called to something. So we need to heed the call, and we don't. This is why we need other people calling out to us. We also need to be the call for others. Sometimes it can be other people who've made such a difference, to our lives, directly, indirectly. John Coltrane never knew me, but across the decades, across time and space, something entered me. The order member, a wonderful order member named Buddhadasa, the servant of the Buddha, led my first class and called me in doing that, using ancient Indian Buddhist words and mantras, called me into the Dharma. And I'm sure you'll have your own stories of what's called you, to a life, whether it's a Buddhist life. I know some of you probably aren't necessarily committed to a Buddhist path, or whatever life you've chosen. Listen to that call coming from outside, coming from inside. Heed that call. It's a subtle voice. It's that still small voice very often. It's not really loud. It's not like heavy metal. Sorry, apologies to any heavy metal aficionados here. It's actually coming from a different dimension, calling you. And I want to finish by reading something not from a Buddhist tradition. It's from a Sufi tradition. It's from an Andalusian Sufi named Ibn Arabi, one of the great Sufi masters. Sometimes he's called the greatest sheikh. It's from the Book of Theophanies, the book of the showings of the divine. This is reality calling. This is truth calling. Listen, O dearly beloved. I am the reality of the world, the centre of the circumference. I am the parts and the whole. If when you perceive me, you perceive yourself, if then you perceive me, you perceive yourself, but you cannot perceive me through yourself. It is through my eyes that you see me and see yourself. Through your eyes, you cannot see me. Dearly beloved, I have called you so often, and you have not heard me. I have shown myself to you so often, and you have not seen me. I have made myself fragrant so often, and you have not smelled me. Savorous food, and you have not tasted me. Why can you not reach me through the object you touch, or breathe me through sweet perfumes? Why do you not see me? Why do you not hear me? Why? 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 For you, my delights surpass all other delights, and the pleasure I procure you surpasses all other pleasures. For you, I am preferable to all other good things. I am beauty. I am grace. Love me. Love me alone. Love yourself in me alone. Attach yourself to me. No one is more inward than I. Others love you for your own sake. I love you for yourself. And you flee from me. Dearly beloved, you cannot treat me fairly. For if you approach me, it is because I have approached you. I am nearer to you than yourself, than your soul, than your breath. Who among creatures would treat you as I do? Be mine. Be for me as you are in me, though you are not even aware of it. Dearly beloved, let us go toward union. And if we find the road that leads to separation, we will destroy separation. Let us go hand in hand. Let us enter the presence of truth. Let it be our judge and imprint its seal upon our union forever. There we are.
So thanks very much to Padmavajra. That was so. I sort of felt lifted a bit into a different realm actually with that. Just this sort of Padmavajra's got such a sort of responsive sensibility. Yeah, just lifting us into that sort of this world of the parable, the imaginal sense, just sort of vivifying us. So really appreciated that. And thanks again for coming over, acting on your spontaneity, your welling up of generosity. And I'd like to offer you a little token.
Oh, lovely.
Somebody hid.
Thank you very much.